So my son is 7th grade. He goes to the Bishop's School, so he just started last year.
All right, we're going to get started in just a moment. And I will record this. I know some people couldn't make it live, so we'll be able to share it. Okay. It's all yours. I'll invite everyone to take a seat. I know it's exciting, but we have a tight hour, and then we've got our little break, and then we've got our next session. So we want to make sure to honor Rabbi's time so we can get our full hour in. Hi, everyone. Go ahead and grab a seat. We're going to get started.
No, you can sit here.
I love it. It's usually the hottest day of the year. I live in LA, so like.
There's some text going around if you're here. If you're on Zoom, I'll project them. But so there's text going around. If you don't have them, we have some extra. I'm just going to ask you if you could return them when we're done. I'll need them for something else. Nice to see everybody. All these greetings. Have a good year, a new year. So I always look at Yom Kippur as being a response to a deep existential dilemma. And the dilemma, for me, isn't sin. Some people might say that. Some might say, well, the dilemma, the human dilemma is sin, and then the response is sin is atonement, or tshuva, or repentance. There's all these words, it's hard to translate. I go a little deeper in following the liturgy, really, is that the dilemma is frailty. We're frail, and sin is a species, a subcategory of frailty. And you could think of ethical frailty, like we're just a mess. We can't even keep our oaths. That's the kol nidra. We can't even keep our vows from 1 year. Every time we make a vow, I'm not sure I can get to that. So we have this ethical frailty, which I think we associate with sin in Yom Kippur. But so I would say the deeper dilemma, which calls for a whole different type of response, is frailty in general. And here I guess I'm thinking of physical frailty, which I'll talk about more. We're physically frail, which is just uncontroversial. We are frail. And so what's the response? And when I say response, like I don't mean an answer necessarily. I don't mean a cure. I spent a lot of times looking for a cure for this. A lot of people do, but I don't mean a cure. I mean a response. And for me, the response to frailty, all kinds of frailty, is redemption. And I'll spend a lot of time today, not a lot of time, whatever time I've got, I'll spend the time I've got trying to understand what I mean by redemption and how redemption is a kind of response, maybe even a satisfying response to human frailty. What I want to begin with, and I'm going to go through different kinds of texts and stories. I really just picked one example from the Machzor, the High Holiday Prayer Book, of frailty and then a response to frailty. So we'll take a look at that first, and then we'll move on to some stories. So let me share the screen. So this is going to take 20 minutes. We're going to do this. Where did it go? There we go. All right. So people at home should have this now. It's over here. So this is text number 1. This is from the Shema Kolenu. I was at the service this morning where we went through this during the Shacharit service. I don't know if you've gone through this yet, or I don't know the different Machzors people use, but this is from the traditional Machzor. Always, even when I was feeling fine, totally, this scared me. To the point where I wanted to throw the book away and run out of the building, but I never did that. I was leading services, so that really wouldn't work. So do not cast us off at time of old age. Eit zikna, time of old age. And also just the fear of abandonment during time of old age. Right away you have frailty that some of us have experience with, but other people will. one of the scary things here is the inevitability of this. We all get old. And getting old comes with frailty and the fear of being abandoned. And then it goes deeper. It's a very difficult book, the Mahzor. Rabbi Stan and I were talking about this the other day. It's not a pretty book. I mean, there's pretty things in there, but so that when our strength fails us, do not forsake us. Kichlot kochenu. Our koach, our strength is going to fail us. It's inevitability. So the Shema Kolenu, which is part of the Slichot, we just let that out. We are frail. We're getting old. Our strength will weaken. It's weakening as we stand here. Now, it doesn't end at this. So to me, the response is the very next prayer, which in a lot of synagogues is sung in a kind of joyous major key, is the Anu Amecha. Anu Amecha. Some of you have heard that. And I'll read a little bit. This is text 2. We are your people, you are our God. We are your children, you are our Father. We are your servants, you are our master. We are your congregation, you are our portion. What I would say is that the response, and again, it's not healing here, or it's not healing in the medical sense. It's not cure, but it's by connecting ourselves to God, which I'll just define as just something greater than ourselves. By connecting ourselves to the infinite, it redeems this frailty. The frailty is inevitable. It's an existential part of the human condition. But the response to that, not tshuva, not a cure, but the response to it is that we can connect ourselves to something greater. And this whole prayer is this covenantal consciousness. We are your people, you are our God. And then it goes on just with synonyms. We're your children, you are our Father. It's a prayer that states this connection. We're these lonely, frail people. We're getting old. We're afraid of abandonment. What's the answer to that? What's the response to that? Is that there's something greater than me. I'll spend some time trying to understand that, but there's something greater than me, and I'm able to connect myself to that. Okay. That's all just an introduction. It's okay. It was 5 minutes. So first I'm going to tell a story. This is one of several personal stories, and they get progressively more depressing. I'm warning you from the beginning. I'm going to say this happened in the early mid part of the pandemic. We're going to come to a point where we're going to periodize the pandemic, the first part, the second part, the third. And I don't know where we're at right now, but this was in the beginning. So this is the early middle part of the pandemic. It was 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago. And at the time I was teaching, still teaching it, and I was teaching a different class at the San Diego Jewish Academy. But it wasn't ordinary teaching. Half the class wasn't there, right? Because just like we have today, there was Zoom. And half the class, the people that were there, they were wearing masks. I was wearing a mask. I still don't know how I did that for a year and a half. They were muffled, I was muffled. The kids that were on Zoom, honestly, I couldn't even see them. I couldn't see that they didn't want me to see them. If you taught high school, then they hid. You had to nag them to turn their camera on. And even if they turned their camera on, all you could see was their eyes. But it was just this strange, wanting to hide while being on Zoom. And then there's supposed to be some kind of teaching that goes on. A lot of people, we understand now the damage that did to teaching. To me, the amazing thing is that there was any teaching at all. I think certain things did get across. Anyway, so I was teaching. It was called Jewish philosophy, and it doesn't matter what I was teaching. It's to the story. If you're interested, I can tell you later. But what I was discussing, and I've done this a few times at Beth Israel, I was discussing the human relationship to nature. It's fascinating, but I'm not going to talk about it right now. And I said what I would normally do, so I'm telling the class, we're studying humans and nature, and are we a part of nature, are we apart from nature? And I said normally what I would do is I would take the class, I'm telling the class this, I would take the class to La Jolla Cove, and then up to the children's pool, because there's been this controversy over seals and how seals interact with humans for years and years. It's still going on. And I just said the class sort of offhandedly. Normally, of course, we'd all go to the beach together. We'd go to those two places, and we would study it more. But of course, this year we can't do that. We can't do it because we can't do field trips. We can't even look at each other. We can't be in the car together. There was no sense then, if you remember, that being outside was better. We didn't really know that then, or we didn't know it enough. Anyway, so I just said we're not going to the beach. And then I was going to go on with the class, and then there was this outpouring of whining. These are primarily seniors, high school seniors, and they're just what? We never get to do anything. We can't go to the beach, and they're planning, and they're yelling at me, and there's this kid, the kid ended up going to Yale. And he was just screaming at me, you never let us do anything. And at first I was surprised because I was thinking, well, these aren't exactly kids that lack privilege. And they've been to the beach. I mean, most of them grew up in La Jolla. I mean, why are you screaming at me? What have I taken away from you that you haven't had already? And so I just kind of went through my mind is that we all talk about this. That the pandemic was particularly hard for young people, and I was thinking this particularly for high school seniors or college seniors. So take high school. So high school seniors think of themselves. Their whole identity is they're on the verge of total freedom, of breaking through. I mean, they've been in this narrow place for their whole life, but suddenly they're thinking, here's what I can do. I can do anything. I can go anywhere. And we were telling them no. Whatever the we is, no, there's a block. We're constricting your choices. What you thought were just choices that could take you anywhere. You can be a rock star, you can be an engineer. No, you can't really go anywhere. You're stuck in your room. And so as I was going through all this and thinking about it, and so there was a psalm. Some words from a psalm that popped into my head, literally. This happens to rabbis. We have psalms or prayers like pop into our head. It happens to me. And so we're looking at text number 3. And this is famous for all sorts of reasons. For me, mostly there's a song that goes with it. So I'll look at it in Hebrew first. So text number 3. Min ha-meitzar karati ya, anani b'merchav ya. So the English is, from the narrow place, Meitzar, I called to the Lord. But the Hebrew word there is Yah for Lord. He answered me with the expansiveness of the Lord. And then again you have the word Yah. So we're going to go through several words here. First of all, I called to God from the narrow place. So the Hebrew for the narrow place there is Meitzar. The problem, right, the dilemma in the first part of the psalm is, I'm in the Meitzar. I'm stuck in the Meitzar. So now, the Hebrew word for narrow is tsar. The word Meitzar means the narrow place. In modern Hebrew, it means like the straits of Tehran. Meitzar, Tehran. So I'm stuck now. What the person is saying, I'm stuck in the Meitzar. Also, those 3 letters, Mem, Tzadik, Reish, which make up Meitzar, you have the word Mitzrayim in there. And Mitzrayim is the narrow place. So what this guy is really saying, the dilemma of this psalm is, I am stuck in Egypt. Egypt is the ultimate place of confinement. I'm calling to God from Egypt. He answered me, and then you have the solution, the response is merchavia. There's an interesting discussion among commentators whether this is one word or 2 words. It doesn't really matter for us. It seems like it's one word, merchavia. If it's one word, there's no equivalent in English. It goes something like the expansiveness of God, or the wide open spaces of God. Merchav is the wide open spaces. Yah, again, is God. So I'm stuck in Egypt, which is the narrow place. I'm in confinement. And I call out to God. God answers me with the expansiveness of God. All right, that just came fit. I mean, I was thinking of they're in the narrow place. The kids are in the narrow place. They're yearning to break free. And I thought that's a good psalm. That's interesting to think about. By the way, I noticed on Rosh Hashanah, it's also a psalm that we chant right before we blow the shofar, which makes some sense too, because the shofar, you go through the air goes through this very narrow space and then comes out to the expanses. Anyway, I thought I'll take a look at some commentary on that psalm. I was just curious. Mid-retired, I was sort of half retired, I had some time on my hands, so I looked up that verse, and I found an interpretation of the verse that, I have to say, changed my life, which doesn't happen that often, but it did change my life. So there's a discussion in the Talmud about this verse, and it goes like this. So this Ben Yehoyada. So the first thing Ben Yehoyada, first thing he notices is that the word for God there is Yah. That's literally half of God's name. Right? God's name is Yud He Vav He, and the Yah is just the Yud and the He. So you might think of God, I'm not really pronouncing it, but it says Yah. Like that's the full God. We only have half. And he says, like, so when you're stuck, when you're in Mitzrayim, you've only got half of God. You only got access to half of God. There was a bunch of things you could do. Suddenly, most of them you can't do. Many of them you can't do. There's still a God there, but it's like you're stuck. There's like those teenagers, there's so much that they wanted to do, and suddenly they were diminished. But he says, so this is where he knocks it out of the park. I mean, he says that. The second part of the verse, so, Mina Meitzar Karatiyah, all I've got of God in Mitzrayim is half of God. But in the second part of the verse, Anani B'mer Chavya, God answers me also with half of God. That's not what I want. I want all of God. But the answer, the response, is also just half of God. And so Ben Yehoyada, I only copy for us this one statement. Half of God's name is enough for the world. That Yah, that half of God has to be enough. And then he points to another song, which we'll look at. Then I got another story. So this is text number 5. I'll read it in Hebrew first. This is one of the few psalms that's actually in God's voice. So the speaker that is speaking is God. When he calls on me, so the he there is this person, me, let's say, or you, stuck in Mitzrayim. When the person stuck in Mitzrayim calls on me, I will answer him. Remember that Mina Meitzah Karate, I'm calling out to God. So this is almost a response. So God is saying, you in Egypt, I'm going to answer you. And then I will be with him in distress. But the Hebrew word there is tsar, not zar. Tsar means there was imo anochi b'tzara. God is saying, I will be with you in Egypt, in your narrative.
Show this on the screen.
In your mode, I will make him honored. So it goes like this. This is the turn for me. Is that, so when you're stuck in Egypt, so you call to God. I mean, that's the people who were stuck in Egypt. And you're telling God, let me out of here. Let me out of here because I'm in Egypt. And God responds, Imo anochi b'tzara. It's not, I'm not going to let you out of there because I'm there already. Now, only half of me is there because you're in Egypt. Your condition is one of confinement. But what I can tell you is that half of God is available to you already in Egypt. Already in Egypt. You just have to connect yourself to it. Imo anochi b'tzara. So he's hinting at something really deep here, which is that we never left Egypt. Which, I mean, in a physical sense, okay, yeah, we left Egypt. But being in Egypt is part of the human condition. Frailty, confinement, everything that the pandemic threw at us. And the response is that I'm not getting you out of Egypt. You're staying in Egypt. But I'm going to be with you in Egypt. All right. Now, I'm doing something I really shouldn't do, but I'm quoting myself. I was thinking I could just explain this, but I feel like, first of all, I wrote a book. A small book that'll come out pretty soon, and where I explain a lot of this. And I thought, well, I might as well just quote from the book. Because I said it as best I could in the book. So I'm at a few places here, it's just me in the book. But anyway, so if you look at text number 6, this is how I explain it. The prisoner thinks she's calling out to God from behind her prison walls, with their praying flying outwards to heaven. God responds, no, I'm with you in Egypt. Even if I'm only half there, even if I'm barely discernible, I still glimmer toward potential, toward some kind of freedom. I'm not coming to rescue you, I'm already there. The wide places you yearn for are hidden in your prison cell. We'll find them together. You just have to work with me. Trust that together you and I will discover hidden sources of expansiveness. Trust and wait. Easier said than done. Okay, next little story. These are all hard, but this is a hard one too. So, in the spring of 2019, so we're coming up on 3 years of this. I came down with an illness, which doctors actually still haven't identified. For our purposes today, and in terms of the symptoms, we're going to call it asthma, which I had my whole life, but which became so severe that I really couldn't work anymore. And it's important actually to me that we focus on the asthma. I mean, asthma actually is a disease of narrowness. Many diseases are diseases of narrowness, but asthma is a disease of narrowness in the sense that your lungs are narrowing. Like you're used to kind of the wide open spaces of breathing. You may not know that if you breathe normally, but to breathe normally is that wide open space is everything you need, inhale and exhale. And asthma is, physically, that's what's happening, but also emotionally, spiritually, what's happening is there's a narrowness, it's narrowing your possibility. You're breathing, but it continues. And to me, the focus on the narrowness of breathing is very important because the word for God, which we talked about before, is Yud He Vav He, which you can pronounce something like Yahweh, which sounds like breathing. A lot of scholars think that's God. God's name is actually the act of breathing. So when I had asthma, I had Yah, because I had half of what I had before. That my breathing was diminished, maybe not half, but you know what I mean, it was diminished. The full capacity was no longer there. For a brief time, during those early, for me, it was the early illness, I kept a journal. Honestly, for like a day or two. Then it just depressed me. It scared me. And I just thought, I'm not going to do this anymore. But I found this from the journal. So this is from July 2019. Here are some of the things I can no longer do. Bike, play tennis, snorkel, run, eat much of what I enjoy, teach, work, socialize, sleep through the night and often sleep at all, breathe with full confidence. I left the breath in there. So these were hard times. And I'm looking at the list right now. So some of these I could pick up again. There are actually additional things that have added, that have come to the list. It's not a static situation. If you've gone through chronic illnesses, you understand. But this is where I was at that moment, and it's not so different right now, to be honest. So what happened was a lot of people with chronic illnesses, especially ones that can't be identified, they spent a lot of time traveling, meeting doctors, talking to doctors, and that was a long process. But I want to talk about what happened sort of towards the middle of it, because it led me to kind of understand Yah, that half of God that I still had in me. So it's a long story, some of you may understand, but I ended up speaking to a speech therapist. And the speech therapist, I mean, of all professions, but the speech therapist taught me some breathing exercises. Just half hour a day that I could do. And it was the first thing that actually made a difference. It didn't cure anything, but it made a difference. And I want to tell you, if you have a hard time breathing, even a small difference is huge. So once I had that small difference, and for me it was like this, okay, there's actually Yah there, there's like something there. Then there was maybe a few other things I could start doing. Okay, so I can breathe a little bit better, things are opened up a bit, I'm not quite as a narrow space as I used to be. So then, I had some doctors that said, okay, you could probably do walks. I used to love to exercise, so do the walks and maybe walk a little bit faster. And then there was okay, so maybe, I'll get to the bike in a second. I was able to do that a little bit more, and then maybe you could even play tennis a little bit. I don't run after the ball, but you can hit the ball, and there's just things you can do, which I will call just like moments of redemption. So I started to think of this really as just, not ordinary physical activities, but moments of transcendence, moments of redemption. I knew that after I swung at a tennis ball, I'm sort of back to that, stuck lungs that I had before, but I could have these moments of redemption, which made a huge difference for me. And one of the most important ones, I retired because I couldn't work, but I realized I could work a little bit. And working a little bit, so I called the school, is there like a really part-time job I could have? And they said yes, and I'll tell like the group of rabbis that we have to get together and talk. I mean, it's just, I could do that. There's things that I could do that were powerful, moments of transcendence, and to me the redemptive element of that Yah. I didn't feel quite as confined. And so now I want to introduce you to another text that became important to me, the song Mr. Tambourine Man by Bob Dylan. So and this is just one, it's a long song, I won't do the whole song, but this is one of the chorus, not the chorus, what do they call what's it called? The verses, one of the verses. Take me disappearing through the smoke rings of my mind, down the foggy ruin of time, far past the frozen leaves, the haunted, frightened trees, out to the windy beach, far from the twisted reach of crazy sorrow. Yes, to dance beneath the diamond sky with one hand waving free, silhouetted by the sea, circled by the circus sands, with all memory and fate driven deep beneath the waves. Let me forget about today until tomorrow. Hey, Mr. Tambourine Man, play a song for me. I'm not sleepy and there is no place I'm going to. Hey, Mr. Tambourine Man, play a song for me. In the jingle jangle morning, I'll come following you. this became really important to me because I was thinking the narrator of this song is stuck in bed, overcome with weariness, but unable to fall asleep. And I found myself in that position a lot. It's just in bed. And even like just a slight problem breathing when you're in bed like that, I just couldn't fall asleep, so I was just in bed. And what was beautiful about this, and again, I mean, Dylan is not necessarily a happy guy. His verses are not necessarily happy, but there was this wonderful image, which is purely in his head, or in his soul, or his consciousness, to dance beneath the diamond sky with one hand waving free. It's just this idea that it's at least, I can't do it now here, I'm stuck in bed, but in my mind, I feel like I can go through the smoke rings of my mind, dancing beneath the diamond sky with one hand waving free, silhouetted by the sea. It was such a beautiful image to me, and it was in my mind I could go there. And it was this was a really powerful moment of redemption, the sense of like, even lying in bed, I had at least the mental capacity for a kind of escape. And it doesn't last. It may let me forget about the day until tomorrow. I mean, tomorrow's going to come. But you can be in that moment, and that moment is enough maybe to get by. It's that response to the frailty. Okay. So we're done with that story. But like I said, they get progressively harder. And this is the hardest one. After this, I have a few happy stories. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my sister-in-law, Carol. So this happened. This is shortly before the pandemic, but I was sick already. So I mean, that's how I identify time now. Like, but before I was sick, after I was sick, before the pandemic, after the pandemic. But so Carol's Susan's sister, she struggled with a debilitating depression. She had actually for several years, and her life kind of fell into narrowness, and it consumed her, and she ended up taking her life. And it was a terrible tragedy and a puzzle also. I mean, a deep existential puzzle to all of us that knew her. So couldn't figure out where the depression was coming from, but also, and I'm not just exaggerating because she was in my family, she was one of the most expansive people that I ever knew. Her heart was so full and wide. She was just incredibly intelligent. She was an attorney, lawyer. And you know, I just one time I had to talk to her about just some legal issues that we were facing. I just couldn't believe how intelligent she was, and her mind roaming from place to place. Really talented. I remember the first time I heard her play piano and sing, I thought she could do this professionally. She was a great athlete. She was on her tennis team in college. She had this confounding generosity too. I mean, a generosity that could drive you crazy, but it showed her expansiveness of soul. And the illness just, we didn't know where it came from. It narrowed her existence, and she took her own life. And I have to be very careful when I say this. It's not that I was sympathetic to the act, but I was in my own narrow phase at the time. And I got it. I mean, it's the idea that your world can narrow to a place where you can't imagine getting out, and you can't call out to Yah for whatever reason. After she passed away, and after the funeral, and then again, like this happens a lot. Again, a song went through my mind. I want to share that song with you because it ended up, for me at least, pinpointing the moments of redemption that are so important when you're in that narrow place. And I want to make sure that I'm clear that everybody is in this narrow place. And then you either will be or you are, or it's just the human condition. But, so this is a song by Lucinda Williams. Some of you may know that. She's a beautiful sort of country folk singer. And she's talking about a friend of hers that took his own life. See what you lost when you left this world, this sweet old world. See what you lost when you left this world, this sweet old world. Then she has a litany, what I'll call of redemptive moments of Yah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Here it is, sweet old world. The breath from your own lips, the touch of fingertips, the sweet and tender kiss, the sound of a midnight train, wearing someone's ring, someone calling your name. And you can go on and on, and you find you'll identify within your own life those moments of redemption. Your own flesh and blood, looking for some truth, dancing with those shoes, the beat, the rhythm, the blues. I heard this song on the radio, came through my mind shortly after we lost her, and it just brought all that Yah to me, those moments of redemption. I guess, and you know, everybody's got their own, and I twirling my wedding ring, I do this a lot, or music, or just looking into someone's eyes, even if they're on Zoom. I mean, everything that we had to do during the darkest days of the pandemic, that seemed so insufficient, but were filled with sufficiency when we did them. And I still do that. I try to exercise that litany whenever I can, and just coming through this, in my worst possible states, those moments of redemption, where I understand that I'm in Egypt. I'm not getting out of Egypt. I'm not looking to get out of Egypt, but Imo Anochi B'Tzara, but God is with me. Yah is with me in Egypt, and I have those moments. Okay. One more story, and then we'll see if there's any comments or questions. So, before I got sick, I was in a bike accident. And it was like 6 months before I got sick. And I often connect those things in my mind, even though I'm pretty sure they're not really related. But, you know, it's how you do in your own health. And so it was, you know, it was pretty bad. I mean, as these go, I was pretty lucky. I slipped and fell, and I broke my wrist. And mostly I was acquainted with the term road rash, which sounds awful, and it feels even worse. It just hurt a lot. And so there were some good Samaritans around us. I fell off my bike. I was riding with my wife, Susan, and so people came. They helped us, and when we got to my car, we drove to the emergency room. And the question is like, what happened to the bike? So the people with us, they knew I didn't even know how to do it, but they knew how to take the front wheel off, and they loaded the bike into our car. And then I go to the emergency room, and we come home, and I don't know what to do with the bike. I don't want to see it. So it's just like, we put it in the garage. I know there's a blood stain on it, but I don't notice much else. Because that road rash, you're bleeding. I was bleeding for a while. And, all right, so the bike was just in the garage, and I wasn't thinking of getting it fixed or even looking at it. Then you have the pandemic. Okay, so what happens during the pandemic is that everybody goes biking. Remember there was like this, and so for me, it was just another reason to feel sorry for myself, because everybody's out there biking, and I used to love biking, and I can't go biking anymore. And then the pandemic goes on. And if you remember, there were these really hopeful moments when we were getting vaccinated, and it seemed like that's going to be the end of it. It's the first vaccine, second vaccine. So I decide things are looking up, and I'm breathing a little bit better, and I'm going to just take my bike into a bike shop and see if anything can be done. And I hadn't even looked at it. So somehow, like even without looking at it, but it doesn't look so bad. I get it into my car and I drive it right into the bike shop, and the guy's like looking at it and thinking, I don't know, maybe I can do something with this. And a week later he calls me and says it's fixed. Like, come and get it. The bike is in better shape than you. Which was true. Like I was damaged by the bike accident, but the bike is like a little bit damaged, and he fixed it. And so I was able to get the bike. But I was still like it. I wasn't going to jump on it. It was going to sit there for a little while. Then I got it out of the garage, and we'll read what happened to it. But before, like I said, these songs, Jewish statements pop into my mind. So I'm about to get on the bike, and I remember, so we'll look at our last text. It's actually really appropriate to have this is text number 10. It's a famous statement from Rav Nachman of Breslov. It's famous because it's a song. Kol ha'olam kulo, gesher tsar ma'od, v'ha'ikar lo lefachei klal. So it says the whole world is a narrow bridge. You have the word tsar in there. So Rav Nachman of Breslov had tuberculosis, and much worse off than me. It's a worse disease, and he was 37 when he died, and didn't have access to the same medical care I have. And he comes to this conclusion: the whole world is a narrow bridge. But he knows what the word tsar means. Basically, he's saying the whole world is Egypt. For him, the whole world is Egypt. I mean, to me, I don't know. I can't talk to him because he's not in front of me right now. But I feel like he's reinterpreting the whole Exodus story. He says there's a physical Exodus story where we got out of Egypt, but in fact, the human condition is tsar, made tsar. The whole world is Egypt. In a deep sense, it is. So since the whole world is Egypt, just let's try to work on not being afraid. And that was also really a beautiful statement for me. That's part of what you have to get over to get to the Yah. In any illness, you're just afraid to do anything. So v'ha'ikar lo lefachei klal. And that kind of went through my mind, as I was thinking of getting on the bike. So now I want to quote Graubart again. This is text number 11. The whole world is a narrow bridge. Rav Nachman, tuberculosis sufferer, taught us. I imagine his breathing came harder than mine, and I certainly had better access to medical care and a less serious illness. Yet he bequeathed to us an exquisite universe of teachings, wisdom that now expands through space and time. If the whole world really is a very narrow bridge, it means that we're all stuck in the narrow place. We're all back in Egypt. This was certainly true this past pandemic year, when even a 2-hour seal-gazing field trip to the beach with a bunch of restless, yearning teenagers was out of the question. We survived, those of us who did, by finding grace through Zoom, turning computer screens into open portals, widening the range of spirit and activity while stuck at home. We also took masked walks and took note of the sweet things in this narrow old world. Grass, sky, sun, pets, rain. As Rabbi would say, we made do with half of God, with Yah. It was just enough. In late February, I got my first shot. I celebrated by hauling my bloody, dusty bicycle to a repair shop. It should be shot, sorry. Amazingly, the bike endured less damage than I. It was fixed a day later, but I waited. In mid-March, I got my second shot at Rite Aid Pharmacy, not far from my house. Assuming I'd be sick the next day, I was, and for the next 2 days, I tentatively approached the newly gleaming good-as-new bike. I hadn't ridden in over 2 years since the accident. I held my breath and wheeled the great machine into my driveway. I twisted my thigh a bit, the pain that would last a week, but I mounted the bicycle. There's a steep downhill incline right outside my house, so I glided a few feet, then pedaled easily. Wind hit my face. It was a cool day for Southern California. I noticed a young girl I'd never seen, riding a tiny white bike, grinning at the breeze, her hair flying through her helmet. A tall neighbor's name I didn't know waved at me. I saw bushes and workmen and houses and trees. Breath flowed into my body and out. I felt freer than I had in years. Of course, this is all downhill. At the bottom would come exertions, decisions, gravity, limitations. But that was for later. For now, for this blessed moment, I was riding free, taking in the sights, wallowing in the sublime, awful beauty of this narrow bridge, this sweet old world. So I thought maybe I'd end my presentation. Maybe some of you know the song called Cologne. Maybe we'll sing that, and then we'll see if anybody has any questions. I'll get to see you. All right. Kol ha'olam gesher tzamod, gesher tzamod, gesher tzamod, kol ha'olam gesher tzamod, gesher tzamod. Thank you. Happy to take any questions. Not putting any pressure on anybody, but if anybody has any comments or questions.
I'm just curious, where are you with your bike riding today?
Well, like I said, it's not static. It's dynamic. But like the last several days, I've been biking a little bit, so it's still there. So it's still important to me. It was a big part of. I don't want to say recovery because I didn't really recover totally, but it was a big part of my living with the illness was the fact that I could ride a bike. Yeah.
So the metaphor of riding downhill, really amazing to me. When you were doing it, did you have these inspirations, these insights when you were actually riding the bike?
I think that first time I did. I mean, even rabbis, we don't go through life, just always inspired by the words of Psalms. We have everyone life. Then the interesting thing about me and my illness is that I didn't start to think spiritually about the illness until well into it. When you first get an illness like this, you're just like you're in a scientific mindset. At least for me, like who's the right doctor? How do I find that doctor? I wasn't thinking of Psalms, and half of God. So that came later. But by the time I got the bike back, I had done a lot of that thinking. Yes.
I really love the idea that God is not there to cure things, to actually expand the size of the bridge you're crossing, or make the bridge go away and dry land in your where you want to go, but to strengthen yourself, to give you confidence that you can deal with what's happening to you.
Yeah.
That seems to me huge.
It was huge, yeah. And it's just in moments. I mean, I don't want to romanticize this. Like it doesn't
But that's the nature of it, that it
Right.
would just be in moments, because if it were there all the time, that would be different.
That's right, that's right. I would actually, I put it this way, that, you know, you have that discussion about what, is the glass half full or half empty? So what I say is, yes, of course the glass is half empty. You don't have what you had before. The glass is half empty, but there's a fullness in that half empty glass. And your task, which isn't easy, is to find the fullness in that half empty glass.
So I find it really amazing in this journey that you've shared with us is that not wanting to do the journal and then ending up writing a book.
Right.
And forgive me because I get a little woozy with the fast. But you said that there was a moment, there was something that changed your life, and was that the catalyst to finally use all of this to
There's two moments. I can identify two moments. One was the speech therapist. It was like the simplest thing. Nobody had suggested breathing exercises before. I went to I literally probably 24 doctors, many pulmonologists. So nobody had recommended just a simple breathing exercise. So that was, just through my own activity, I could breathe a little better for a little while. And then there was the looking up the from the narrow place, and that comment on the narrow place where half of God is there with you, no matter where you are. Yeah.
Hi. I just have a comment. So we haven't seen each other, but I've been the last 3 years I've been in bed a lot too, and not being able to sleep with chronic migraines, and not being able to do all the things that I used to be able to do, and I never prayed until I was stuck in that place. I had never asked God for help, and I'm starting to feel a little better now, but I also haven't gotten on my bike yet. So I just want to let you know that I'm just a little closer to getting on my bike because of this. So thank you.
It's good if you have a hill at the top of your Like I said, then you have to deal with, and I end the essay there, and I'm going downhill. I don't say what happens with it, There are hills and there are uphills too.
I had just gotten my bike like in perfect shape too, and then I started getting the migraines, and so.
If I can add one thing in addition to riding a bike, listen, Rabbi, breathing.
Yes,
You might combine the two.
it's been sitting in my garage. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing what's been going on in such a meaningful way that benefits all of us so much. I'm thinking about my sister who's had for a year, she has a lot of health problems, but she got a special extra one that involves breathing, which is a fungus that's living in her lungs, aspergillosis, I don't know. Anyway, it's like getting worse, but I want to share what you talked about today with her. And I'm just like, I wish she had the benefit of a spiritual practice, or well, she does, but this tradition would be nice. And then I'll share what you shared. But I have a question about the word redemption and being redeemed. And like every year when I come to services, something stands out first time every time. And I was hearing redemption today too, and I'm like, I don't think I understand it. But what do you mean by it?
Yeah, so redemption for me is not a solution, it's not a cure, it's the ability to transcend whatever difficulty you're facing and live a life. So that's redemption. So there's a lot of different ways to translate that, but for me that's what I was looking for. I knew I wasn't looking for a cure, but I was looking for, I like the word transcendence as kind of the vehicle for redemption. That I'm able to, okay, I've got this breathing issue, and I'm still riding my bike and it's downhill, a little bit uphill too. So I've redeemed that suffering into something that's more manageable for me.
I just wanted to share one of the things that came to mind when we were talking and about the Dylan and the freedom in your mind and to go places. I thought about, somehow that reminded me of Viktor Frankl's book, In Search for Meaning. So those passages where he was, had no quality of life, but could just look up and see the sunshine and how he used his mind. So I just thought I would share that. It was helpful.
Yeah, that's great. That scene, was really what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I had read that book, so I think it had crossed my mind. It's Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah.
And it's in the first, there's two parts, one is his theoretical, the therapy, but the first part is his experiences as a Holocaust survivor.
Well, and in the camps, yes, and how in the
And
camps
then, yeah, right.
he obviously was in horrendous conditions, and so what he did with his mind to try to still, find anything to comfort him.
Yeah. Primo Levi is also very good for that. His book is Survival in Auschwitz, and also just that he had moments too, that laughter, shaving. He has the scene where he decides he's going to shave with broken glass because it brings him a moment.
Primo Levi?
Primo Levi, so it's Primo. His first name, and Levi is Levi. It's a very short book, Survival in Auschwitz, 120-some pages, a classic, a really important
Thank
work.
you.
I think there's a confusion in America especially between redemption and salvation. And I think that's, I think the salvation is very Christian, but
Yeah.
I think because we live in a very Christian world, we tend to get mixed up about that. And I think we think redemption is salvation, that it's some kind of final act.
Right.
And I find myself thinking of redemption as this thing where I'm saved, I can overcome something and there's a finality to it, and it's really not that, which is a shame.
I don't think it is, but yeah, I think redemption in Judaism, at least in my understanding of Judaism, it's not like the happy ending that salvation is. It's a constant struggle every day. There's Soloveitchik writes really beautifully about, Joseph Soloveitchik writes really beautifully, Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik about redemption. And he says the goal of religion isn't salvation, it's redemption.
But also, I think of redemption as an action. So that also keeps us going, right? So even
Yeah.
in these moments of utter despair and, that moving sharing of your sister-in-law, that perhaps she couldn't cry out just even half, it is a process, right? It isn't like the end. I can redeem myself. May I redeem myself? How can I redeem? And that's a continuous thing, right?
All right, I think we'll stop there. Sorry, Rabbi Stein. Yeah.
The idea of half of God in the world, I find extraordinary. First of all, thank you for that. I've never heard that teaching, but it's so daring.
Yeah.
Theologically.
It's amazing, yeah.
It's daring, and it's against traditional rabbinic theology. They would never say we have God, we have all of God. So the fact that he had the courage to make such a theological statement, that is really extraordinary.
Yeah.
And I find it helpful just thinking about it. I don't have to have all of it.
Right.
I have enough.
Yeah. Right, enough. Yeah. All right, thank you very much. Shana Tova. Oh, so I can ask people to give me back the text. If you really like it, Eileen has my email address and I can forward it to you.
I can email, if you want to send it, I can send it to register. Oh, actually, no, send it when we're registered online, right? Okay, hit me up and we'll get it to you. Handouts for all. I'm gonna end the Zoom